I hacked our team's hiring process to save ourselves a ton of time and make for a better candidate experience. So it ended up saving the candidate about 3 to 4 hours, our team about 30 minutes each, so about 3 or 4 hours for them as well as a team. It got to a faster decision, removed bias in the decision making, and ultimately left more time for us to do reference interviews and spend a little bit more time going deeper with the candidate. So I used Carbon Voice and Claude with our MCP server to do this. And let me show you how it worked. So what's the problem with normal hiring? Often you have a hiring manager or someone else doing a pre-screening. They ask a bunch of questions to kind of get through the basics and vet who the person is, get to know them a little bit, establish some rapport, lots of conversation that happens there. Then often you break into smaller sessions for the team, having an interview panel of 4 or 5 people to maybe interview that person. And they're asking different questions. And, depending on how robust your hiring and experienced your team is, you maybe have a great rubric where they're asking different questions and going deep on each subject matter. But a lot of times also people are asking the same questions, especially the getting to know them, getting the baseline pieces in place. So the then everyone comes back together, shares notes, and says, "Here's what I think about the person, and should we hire or no hire?" And sharing what they interpreted out of the answers that were in there. So there's a few problems. One is there is redundancy in a lot of the questions. There's scheduling to get the candidate available to meet with those individuals, and the availability of all those. It's a lot of time and investment for the candidate in there. And because of the redundancy in questions, that often that can also lead the candidate to saying the same things. And their energy level is obviously going to be different when they answer that question in different ways. And then you have the interpretation when you're sitting in that uh, uh, room and essentially comparing notes. One person will say, "Well, they didn't answer that question to me in that way," and the other person feels it is. And then you're trying to figure out, was it the way we asked the question or was it the answer? And different people have different perspectives on that. And so some of these things can be solved through lots of rubric testing and other design so that people can really focus their area. But what we did was very different. What I did is I added the person that we were interviewing, and a few people we were actually interviewing, into a conversation. And I started asking them all of the questions that we would normally ask to get through. And so in this case, it looks something like this. I added them to the Carbon Voice conversation and asked some questions. And then, conversation was going on back and forth as the person answered and went through the discussion. And so that was great. It allowed me to go deep, ask follow-up questions. It removed some bias also because it was asynchronous, allowed the person to think and not necessarily do a quick canned response. Some will ask, well, what happens if they were looking up answers and are figuring things out? And that is true even in today's world where people are taking live interviews and doing some of that, or in a situation where someone does a lot of prep and is really good at interviewing because they predict the questions that are going to come. So that is definitely a potential risk. What we were doing to test for that was obviously consistency of answers and asking the same question and philosophies, and did that follow through in all of the answers. So ultimately, that's always a risk and something we continue to drill down in different ways. So what that allowed us to do was essentially get down to a set of questions, got to a place where it felt the answers were good. Then the next step of what I did is I added the team to this conversation. So now everyone got to be part of it and got to go back and listen to the conversation up to that point. They could follow up and ask follow-up questions to any one of the ones that I had asked on the answer to get a little deeper for their particular area. But they also meant they didn't have to re-ask the question, and they got a feel for the candidate right from the beginning of how I asked the question, how they answered the question. And so that was really useful. Then the team asked follow-up questions. That went on for a little bit. Everyone got to hear it and got to hear the results. So then we as a team met and decided based off what we wanted to do. as a follow-up, I went in further and I did reference interviews, spent time with references, asking questions, as well as did a live Zoom discussion to further make sure that everything sort of matched in the live discussion of what we were seeing and feeling in there. What was also cool is because it was all there, I was then went into Claude and further after we'd made the decision, I was like, I'm curious what Claude will say. And so I took this question. In this case, I just passed the conversation ID, which I had grabbed, but I could have just shared the name of the conversation. I said, there's a discussion. You're a hiring manager. How would you rate this candidate? It grabbed all of the stuff, and based on the discussion, it ended up giving a score, but more importantly, it broke down the different pieces and why. And I was able to sort of gut check that against what we were seeing, what I saw in the answers, and see if there was anything missed. So I both was able to leverage a much faster process, more people involved, take less time, happen faster, happen in the, in fact, you can see here, I asked this follow-up question: what was the total duration of the messages? And key statistics came out. There was 61 messages, 56 over a course of an hour and 15 of discussions. The longest one was when I moved into pitch mode, explaining the role in the company, and started getting reactions. And this played out over a few days, and some of that was actually over the weekend, and that led to both the human side, much more human in terms of getting the discussion, much more context for everyone involved, but then also checked with AI through, seeing if we'd missed anything and see if it came to the same conclusion. So super awesome process in terms of speed, but also removing bias and getting to different learnings. We could have even asked in there, what questions did we not answer we should have answered? Anything that we could ask an AI, we could follow up and have asked in this way. So anyway, reach out if you want to learn more how I did it and how to set this up. Super awesome process, and excited to hear what you think of it.